Hello, this is Ozic. Welcome to the Basic Grammar Verb class. This course has 5 main parts plus extra videos, and this video is the 4th part. We already covered important guidelines in the previous video, so I won't repeat them here. However, I want to stress again, approach words by looking at whole sentences and pay attention not only to pronunciation, but also to stress and intonation. Also, these teaching materials were created after many years of research, so please don't use them without contacting us first and giving proper credit. The lesson materials include 23 pages with exercises, which you can download after signing up on our website. We recommend printing and following along with split-screen viewing, but you can also watch without downloading. The purpose of learning grammar is only one thing: to communicate smoothly. This one is very important, but it is something almost no grammar textbooks ever mention. Take a look at the examples we studied earlier. What do they all have in common? Here's the answer. They all use the same suffix er. By adding this suffix to certain words, English expresses a person's identity. Of course, there are exceptions, such as cameraman. Some often say it's attached to verbs. But that is not really accurate. It can be attached to nouns, adjectives, and even Latin roots. And it is not limited to people. It can also describe certain living creatures. For example, the word grasshopper literally describes an insect whose identity is jumping over the grass. In another example we already saw, it's not just er. Suffixes like or, ar, and even ist are also used to show a person's identity. It may look complicated. In fact, nouns made with these suffixes are sometimes called agent nouns. But don't worry, you don't need to memorize that term. The real issue is that there are many such suffixes. And worse, there is no strict rule to decide which one attaches to which word. But relax. Your own language has plenty of complicated suffixes too, doesn't it? You never memorize them one by one. You simply absorb them as you grew up. English works the same way. With steady exposure and repetition, your brain will naturally store these patterns without effort. Now let's look more closely at other suffixes that express identity. The suffix ar is relatively rare. Still, we have some well-known words such as beggar, liar, and scholar. Sometimes extra letters are added before the ending. There are not many, but a few good examples are lawyer, hotelier, cashier, soldier, warrior, and savior. English has also borrowed endings from French. Words like amateur, entrepreneur, and chauffeur all come from French. Their roots are different, but you can think of them as belonging to the same family of suffixes. Another important pattern is er versus ee. In many pairs, er describes the person who does something, while ee describes the person who receives the action. For example, the employer is the one who hires. The employee is the one who is hired. The trainer is the one who trains. The trainee is the one being trained. The interviewer asks the questions. The interviewee answers them. The mentor guides. The mentee receives guidance. And of course, in sports, we say referee. Most of the time, the stress falls on ee. Words like escapee, absentee, refugee. Don't worry about memorizing the meanings yet. We will meet them again in sentences, where they become much easier to understand. So why did we take the time to look at these suffixes in such detail? Let me give you a simple example. It's very important. If I ask students to translate this sentence, Gina is good at swimming, most of them write, Gina swims well. That is not wrong. A few creative students might write, Gina swims like a dolphin. Once in a while, someone will even say, Gina is a dolphin, using a metaphor. But in my 30 years of teaching, I have never once seen a student write, Gina is a good swimmer. Of course, there are subtle differences in nuance, and for non-native speakers, it's unrealistic to expect full control of those nuances. But the fact is, native speakers strongly prefer this type of expression. They don't just use agent nouns like swimmer to state identity, they also use them to describe ability. If we want to truly master English, not only speaking but also listening and reading with ease, we must be comfortable with this kind of expression. Now let's see some examples of how these forms are actually used. For the moment, forget the grammar terms and just focus on the sentences. Some of them are long, and a few words may feel difficult. But that's okay. Think of this as one more step in your growth. Don't try to memorize every new word. Instead, pay attention to how the information flows and how the suffixes, highlighted in bold brown, carry meaning. Remember, there is no need to force every English noun into a direct noun translation. It is often much more natural to translate an agent noun into a verb in your language. The purpose is simple: communication. Here's the first example. The woman designs furniture. For her health and also to provide better customer service, as a freelancer, she begins each morning by taking a walk and then jogging. In her words, jogging is different from running. Running is a little bit faster. You see the point? In English, the word designer is an agent noun, but it feels more natural if you process it as an action. Someone designs. The same is true with jogger versus runner. Once you get used to reading this way, you will also find it easier to move in the opposite direction. You can naturally turn verbs in your language into English nouns by adding specific suffixes. Let's look at another example. I don't use TikTok. At first, I only wrote blog posts, but now I post on YouTube and Instagram too, and I heard that once you have more than 10,000 followers, you can become a target for hackers. So honestly, I'm a bit worried. Sounds natural, doesn't it? Here, notice the agent noun follower. It doesn't just mean a person who follows. It creates a clear identity. Someone who regularly checks your posts. That is exactly why native speakers prefer this form. Now let's look at a spoken expression. That's my ball. Sorry. The one who finds it can keep it. The one who loses it cries. In other words, the one who picks it up owns it. You see, so far there haven't been any really difficult words, right? Now let's check the stress and listen carefully.
She's a furniture designer, and for her health and to provide better customer service as a freelancer, she starts every morning as a walker and then become a jogger. She said a jogger is different from a runner moves a bit faster.
I am not a TikToker. At first, I was only a blogger, but now I am a YouTuber and Instagrammer. But I heard if you have more than 10,000 followers, you can become a target for a hacker, so I am worried.
That is my ball.
Sorry. Finders keepers, losers weepers.
Here's the next sentence. He started as an outfielder for the LA Dodgers. Then he moved to the Texas Rangers. He changed to an infielder. Now he plays as a pitcher. He is very good at pitching many innings. People say he is an innings eater, a pitcher who throws many innings. Baseball fans will find this example easy to follow, right? Here is the next example. The famous person who plays roles in movies only had a short part as a housewife, but she was a real scene stealer. That means she took the attention away from the main actor. This shows the producer, the person who controls the movie, who made the final choice, has good sense when choosing actors. By now, the word order and the way we shift information should feel more familiar. Let's check pronunciation and stress.
He debuted as an outfielder for the LA Dodgers, but after transferring to the Texas Rangers and becoming an infielder, he is now playing as a pitcher. He's a good innings eater. The famous actor had only a short housekeeper role, but she was a real scene stealer. This proved that the producer, as the final decision maker, had good sense when casting her for the movie.
Let's look at another example. That stalker was once a fisherman, meaning he was fishing before he started stalking. He ran away from the policeman, but in the end he was shot by a sniper. Now he is in prison. Notice the last part. We don't need to force a word like prisoner. Saying he is in prison communicates the meaning clearly enough. Your brain is not too old to learn this. You simply need to process the idea differently. By the way, some nouns are formed with man or woman, like cameraman. Here's another example. Paul was only a beggar, but he was also a passionate reader, meaning reading with passion. Every day he read newspapers and abandoned books. In the end, he used what he learned, and he became a farmer. Later, he started using AI, and now he runs a big company. Again, at the end, we don't need to force the word leader. There are many ways to express the same idea. This leads us to a famous saying that uses rhyme. A good reader is a good leader. This means, if you read a lot of books, you will be able to guide others well. Now let's check the stress and listen. Mark the stress with your pen right away. That will help you. And remember, focus on the sentence as a whole, not on memorizing each word separately. You already know memorizing words one by one doesn't really work.
The stalker, who used to be a fisherman, ran away from the police officers but was finally shot by a sniper. Now, he is a prisoner.
Paul was only a beggar, but he was also an avid reader who read every newspaper and abandoned book. In the end, he used what he learned to become a farmer using AI, and now he is the leader of a big company.
Now let's look at another example. Listen carefully. As a person in the government who makes laws, as a person who decides rules for the country, as a person who tries to stop fighting, as a person who writes laws, I promise to represent not only the voters. Who are they? They are the people who support me, but also everyone. I promise to be a voice for the people, meaning I will speak for the people, also meaning being their spokesperson, and to play a role in leading this society in a better direction. It may feel a bit unusual, but you can see that communication happens instantly. Only a few words are difficult. Here is a spoken expression. That woman really loves Audi. She attends every new car launch event that Audi holds. She also buys souvenirs because she is a passionate collector, meaning she collects with energy. Pretty simple, right? Here is another spoken expression. I can't live without coffee. I love going to that cafe. When I go, the barista makes my coffee the way I like it, and someone who serves food to the customers brings water to my table. Again, the meaning is clear right away. Now let's check stress and pronunciation. You may already know some of these words, but remember, if you don't know where the stress is, you can't really say you know the word.
As a senator, policymaker, peacemaker, and lawmaker, I promise to represent not only the voters who supported me, but also all people, and to be the voice of the people, and play a role in leading society in a better direction.
She is an Audi lover, so she attends every new car launch event by Audi and buys souvenirs as a passionate collector.
I'm a coffee person and love visiting the cafe. There, the barista makes my coffee to my taste, while the waiter brings water to my table.
Let's go a little deeper. Tom Cruise is famous for riding motorcycles well and for flying planes. He even does his own stunts without a stuntman. Even when he's in training, he learns with real intensity, so he always works hard and ends up mastering everything. Did you hear how I processed the information? I turned the key nouns, the ones highlighted in brown on the screen, into verbs as I read. You can do this too. There's a very important grammatical device inside that sentence. You could still understand it without knowing the rule. Great. But knowing the device will make your reading logic even stronger, so I'll explain it in detail in another video. Let's look at another example. The person who tells the news introduced the person who speaks to the audience. And the person who speaks to the audience welcomed the person who writes books. During the show, the person who writes books answered questions about the new book. You see what happened here? All those agent nouns, newscaster, announcer, author, can be replaced with simple verbs. Tell, speak, write. This way, even beginners can understand the meaning quickly. Now another example. The person who is referred to for resolving or judging a matter in the game surprised all the fans. He gave a warning card to the player who tries to score, and he gave a red card to the player who keeps the ball from going in the goal. Again, instead of memorizing nouns like referee, striker, goalkeeper, you can just think refer, score, keep. Much easier, right? This example sentence plays with the symbolic meanings of yellow and red in football, but it is relatively easy to understand. So remember, don't try to memorize nouns one by one. Focus on the action, and your brain will connect the meaning naturally. Let's check pronunciation and stress, and listen.
Tom Cruise is famous for being a rider and an aviator who performs his own stunts without a stuntman. Even as a trainee, he is such a passionate learner that he always works hard to master everything.
The newscaster introduced the announcer, who then welcomed the author to the show. During the program, the interviewee answered questions about her new book.
The referee surprised all the spectators by giving a yellow card to the Red Wings striker and a red card to the Yellow Stars goalkeeper.
Let's look at the next example. The person who writes in the newspaper said that hundreds of people from other countries and many travelers come to the place where teeth are fixed every day for treatment. The fun part of the writing was this. Even the famous person who fixes teeth, the one who always wants everything perfect, also goes for treatment every weekend to feel better. Now you see, information switching is getting easier. Here's another example. The single singer made a new version of a famous song. And this singer released it by working with many people who play music. For example, the person who plays piano, the person who plays violin, the person who plays guitar, the person who plays cello, and the person who plays drums. People who have many followers and can change others' opinions came together to record this moment. And one last example, the person who gives advice spoke kindly to young computer workers. The advice was, become a person who makes programs, a person who runs systems for both long-time money investors and short-time money investors. In short, he told them to build and run systems for all kinds of investors. Of course, at this stage, it's not possible to do everything perfectly right away, but now you understand the method, how to switch information, how to use these nouns with endings. Now let's check the pronunciation and stress. Remember, focus on the suffixes and how we change the information. One more time. Our goal in learning this grammar is simple, not to memorize words, not only to pass a test, but also to communicate smoothly.
According to the journalist's article, hundreds of foreigners and tourists visit the dental clinic every day for treatment. The article amusingly notes that even the famous perfectionist dentist goes to see a therapist on weekends for healing.
The soloists remade their hit song and released it by hiring many musicians such as a pianist, violinist, guitarist, cellist, and drummer. Numerous influencers gathered to capture this moment.
The counselor generously advised the young computer programmer to become a developer who can operate systems not only for long-term investors but also for day traders.
Now we move on to a new category. These are not about people, but about things, objects with a kind of identity. Linguists sometimes call them device nouns. Don't worry about the term, just focus on the examples. Here's the first one. Wow, it's cold. Can you turn on the thing that makes my seat warm? I think you turned on the thing that makes my seat cool by mistake. So, this is about turning off the seat cooling system and turning on the seat heating system in a car. Next example. The basketball player became a hero when he made a shot at the exact moment the game-ending buzzer sounded. The ball went in, and then many reporters and picture takers ran in to capture the moment as he celebrated with his teammates and coaches. For those who watch sports often, this is a very familiar scene. Now, the next one. After work, the person who draws pictures, an illustrator, changed into pajamas, put on easy slip-on shoes, and went to the bathroom to shave with the machine that cuts hair on the face. But then, the machine that makes water hot broke down. So he gave up, checked the next day's schedule on his planner, and then went to sleep. See? Many of these words are actually familiar. But the stress and pronunciation might not be what you thought. Now let's listen carefully to the stress and pronunciation.
Wow, it's chilly. Can you turn on the seat warmer? I think you accidentally turned on the seat cooler.
The basketball player became a hero when he made a buzzer beater, and many reporters and photographers all rushed to capture the moment he celebrated it with his teammates and coach.
After finishing work, the illustrator changed into pajamas from the hanger, put on slippers, and went to the bathroom to shave with a razor. However, the boiler was broken, so he gave up on everything, checked the next schedule in his day planner, and went to sleep.
Let's look at the next example. The singer tried hard to remove a sticker from an all-in-one computer, a computer with the screen and the computer in one box. Then, a dream catcher, a hanging thing that people say catches bad dreams, suddenly moved and made a sound. Following that sound, he ran to the synthesizer, a machine that mixes many sounds, and started to make music because that rhythm gave him an idea. This is something you might often read in music-related articles. Now, another example. The maker of A Second Self and the ender of work, in simple words, the director of Avatar and Terminator, James Cameron, is seen as a pioneer, a person who opens a new way of very big movies called blockbusters, with visual effects so strong they feel like the ground is shaking. If you often use online streaming services, you should watch this movie. Even though the word order and expressions may sound unusual, there is no problem with understanding the meaning. As a note, Avatar does not come from English, it comes from Sanskrit, in which it means a god's form that comes down to earth. These days, in virtual communities, it is often used to mean your second self. But for our lesson here, it has nothing to do with suffixes. Now let's check the pronunciation and stress.
The vocalist was trying to remove a sticker from his all-in-one computer when the dreamcatcher suddenly shook and made a sound.
Drawn by the noise, he rushed to his synthesizer and began composing music inspired by the rhythm.
The director of Avatar and Terminator, James Cameron, is recognized as a pioneer who opened a new path for blockbusters with groundbreaking visual effects technology. If you are an OTT person, you had better watch these movies.
Now let's challenge ourselves with longer and more complex examples. There will be words and grammar points you haven't learned yet, but that's okay. Our goal here is information switching. Just let your brain process it, and with repetition, it will become natural. Here's the first example. The person who takes money in a shop, the cashier, was secretly watching the seagull in the moonlight, Sailor Moon, from behind the counter. Then the person who cleans and takes care of a building, the janitor, caught her, but the cleaner did not tell the boss, so the cashier thought the janitor was her savior. Just for reference, the word counter, which is usually used to mean a sales counter, may seem related to the verb to count or to calculate, but it is not a device noun. Of course, when used to mean a machine that counts bills in a bank, it is a device noun. And the counter in counterpunch is actually a completely different prefix, which means to oppose or resist. Next sentence. The business starter told the bank workers, "Don't be only simple people." What kind of people? People who are good at using a calculator, but be true humanists. People who understand feelings, even the feelings of customers with no money. Treat even poor customers with kindness. Be people who ride bicycles to grow stronger, in other words, to build your body. And be dreamers, people who dream about a better world. You see, it's not that difficult. Now, one more example. There are many war scenes in the movie Gladiator, a story about fighters in old Rome. For these scenes, many extras were hired to act as outside soldiers and warriors, and advanced translation machines, tools that change one language into another, were also used to make sure there was smooth communication on the film set. In this sentence, employ means to use, not to hire. Of course, this is not easy yet, but you have the potential. Focus on the pronunciation and stress. Don't try to memorize each word. Get used to the sentences themselves.
The cashier was secretly watching Sailor Moon behind the counter when the janitor caught her. However, the janitor didn't report it to the boss, so the cashier considers the janitor her savior.
The entrepreneur encouraged the bank tellers not to become just people who use calculators well, but to be true humanists who understand the hearts of even customers without money, to become cyclists to build their strength, and to be idealists who keep dreaming.
There are several battle scenes in the movie Gladiator. For these scenes, many extras were hired to play the roles of foreign soldiers and warriors, and high-quality translators also had to be employed to ensure smooth communication on set.
Let's look at another example. The person who makes something, the creator, designed a new radar, and the person who gives advice, the advisor, gave expert tips on how to improve the radar's performance. They all worked together, trying to push the limits of technology. In other words, they cooperated to go beyond the boundary of technology. It sounds a little awkward, but you understand it immediately, right? That's the key. Trying to translate this into your perfect written language is just a waste of time. By the way, since the word radar also ends in AR, one might mistakenly think it is a noun with a suffix, but in fact, it is an abbreviation. And here's another one. One time, a famous scholar and professor had to attend a conference. He needed to use the projector, the machine that shows video on the wall, but he didn't know the way to the conference, so he hired a professional driver. Most people didn't know the shortcut to that place, but this driver was an early adopter, a person who gets used to new things earlier than others, and he used a navigation app, the tool that shows the way, very well. Now, don't panic just because you see some difficult words. That's not the goal of this lecture. The real goal is practicing word order and information switching. Of course, if you want to review vocabulary, that's fine. But when you do, remember how you process the meaning in this natural word order. Now let's check the pronunciation and the stress.
The creator designed a new radar and the advisor gave expert advice on how to improve the radar's performance, all working together to push the boundaries of technology.
When a famous scholar and professor had to attend a meeting using a projector but didn't know the way, he hired a chauffeur. Most people didn't know the shortcut to the conference, but the driver was an early adopter and used the Navigator app very well.
Let's check out a spoken example. That woman is the kind of person who tries to please everyone. But the real meaning is this. She's someone who always looks around, follows others, and just agrees with everything. So, when her friends wanted to watch a tearjerker movie, a movie that makes you cry, she said yes, even though she knew she would end up crying. That's the idea. She didn't really want to, but she gave in, just to please others. Now here's something many learners get wrong. They often say romantist, but the correct word is romanticist. See this example. That scientist was a person who values love, beauty, and deep feelings. He treated his girlfriend with so much care. He was also a skilled cook, the kind of person who can use all kinds of cooking tools well. See? Be careful here. Cooker is not a person. A cooker is a cooking device, like a rice cooker or an electric cooker. If you want to say a person who cooks, you just say cook. Simple, right? All right, now let's level up to a longer and more complex example. Don't panic. Pay special attention to the gender of pronouns here. My employer is a woman. She hired a selfish manager, a guy in his late 30s. But that guy treats me, and I'm 47, as if I were his employee. Like he's the boss. He hardly even knows how to use a word processor, the machine for typing documents. He spends his day just opening envelopes with a cutter. Then he stamps documents with a stapler, and the rest of the time he wastes it just doing simple little tasks. It sounds long, but if you follow step by step, it's not impossible. Notice also the pronunciation. Words ending with EE usually have the stress on the last syllable. But there's an exception, employee. The stress is not always at the very end. Now let's hear it.
She is such a people pleaser that when her friends wanted to watch a tearjerker, she agreed, even though she knew it would make her cry.
The scientist was a romanticist, so he was very kind to his girlfriend. He was also a skilled cook who could use all kinds of cookers well.
My female employer hired a selfish supervisor in his late 30s, and he treats me, a 47-year-old, as if I were his own employee. He can barely use a word processor, spends all day just opening envelopes with a cutter and stapling the documents inside with a stapler, and idles away doing only simple tasks.
Let's look at the next example. Why does the machine that lifts people, the escalator, is not working in this state-of-the-art skyscraper? Why is the machine that gives off heat, the radiator, broken? And why is the internet server connection slow? Hurry up and search with the search tool, the search box. Most of these words are familiar, right? State-of-the-art means very modern and cutting edge. Skyscraper is literally sky plus scraper, a building so tall that it may touch and scrape the sky. Now another example. A person who leads a church and guides people in faith carried lattes in a small tool that helps hold cups, gave them to poor teenagers who go to church, told them to read the book that sells more than any other in history, the Bible, and then shared a prayer with them. Because Christian language appears a lot in everyday English for many native speakers, it helps to be familiar with these expressions, whatever your own beliefs may be. Now let's check pronunciation and stress. Listen for intonation and notice how the suffixes help carry meaning.
Why isn't the escalator working in that state-of-the-art skyscraper? Why did the radiator break down? And why is the connection with the internet server so slow? Hurry up and search it with your browser.
The pastor brought lattes in a cup carrier to poor teenage churchgoers, recommended that they read the greatest bestseller in history, the Bible, and shared a prayer with them.
Here's the final point. A single word with the same suffix can sometimes describe both a person and a thing. Let's look at some examples. The driver had to use a driver to open the panel before downloading a new driver to upgrade the car's self-driving system. In this sentence, we see three different meanings of driver. First, a person who drives a car. Second, a small tool that pushes or turns screws. Third, software that helps hardware work properly. And of course, in golf, driver also means the biggest club used for tee shots. If you think about it, the core meaning of drive is to push forward. That's the concept. Another example? In the meeting, the speaker spoke passionately through the speaker, and the sweeper swept the floor with a broom after everyone had left. Here, speaker means a person giving a speech and also the device that makes sound. Sweeper means a cleaner with a broom, but in sports such as soccer, a sweeper is the last defender who sweeps away the attack. In baseball, if one team wins all 3 games in a series, we say they made a sweep. The image is clear, right? Let's check the pronunciation and stress and listen, focusing on intonation and the role of suffixes.
The driver had to use a screwdriver to open the panel before downloading a new driver to upgrade the car's autonomous driving system.
At the meeting, the speaker gave a passionate speech over the speaker, and the sweeper cleaned the floor with a sweeper after everyone left.
And the final example. Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone in 2007. It was a turning point that changed daily life for people around the world. The iPhone was a real game changer. It changed the world markedly. Steve Jobs himself was also a game changer, not only an optimistic person but also a real go-getter, a person who does not wait for things to happen. In this last example, game changer is used both for a thing, the iPhone, and for a person, Steve Jobs himself. So remember, the same suffix, the same form, but depending on context, it can mean either a person or a device. That's the beauty of English word formation. Let's look at a short piece from a Steve Jobs interview. I am an optimist. I believe people are smart. Notice the suffix ist in optimist. It means a person who believes in something positively.
I'm an optimist. I believe people are smart.
I believe you guys are all smart too. Now let's check pronunciation and stress and listen.
Steve Jobs announced the iPhone in 2007, which became a turning point that changed the daily lives of people around the world. The iPhone was a game changer, and Steve Jobs was not only an optimist but also a true go-getter and a game changer himself.
In this video, we learned the suffixes used to express identity. With these, we can use the verb be much more effectively. So of course, review and try applying them in your daily life. Especially if you actively use them in speaking and writing, you'll quickly feel a big difference. After you finish reviewing, please do the exercises on page 19 and then watch the explanation video. I've included question types that appear on many standardized exams. That concludes Basic Grammar, Chapter 1, the verb be. Thank you.